Hello, I'm here to see Santa. My name is Mr. Spoongasset, and I'm here to see Santa.
I'm sorry, what?
Santa. I'm here to speak to Santa. St. Nick? Kris Kringle?
Well, which one is it?
What do you mean?
Well, excuse me if I'm not Gerald the Mind Reader with gypsy powers and a ridiculously bulbous hat, but which of the three gentlemen would you like to see? Santos, Nicholas, or Christopher?
Is your name really Gerald?
No, it's Clapminster Tongue and Panties.
So to say, you'd be bloody weird if your name was Gerald.
No weirder than you, Mr. Spoongusset, no weirder than you. Now, who is it that you'd like to see again?
Well, I'd like to see...
Sorry, my goodness, is that the time? Could you stand slightly to your left, Mr. Spoongusset?
What?
Quickly.
Oh, all right then.
And could you hop up and down on one leg and whistle the Marseillaise?
What? Oh,
quickly, man, we haven't got
okay.
all night. Phew, that's another innocent slaughter of firstborn haddock narrowly avoided for another millennia. Now, what was it I could do for you?
Right, yeah. Well, I'd like to see...
Name?
Well, you know my name. It's Spoongasset. Ezra Spoongasset.
2 A's in that, are there?
No.
Good, that's what I thought. So how can I help you?
Well, I'd like to see Santa.
Where do you live? What's your address? What's your annual income? And if you don't mind me asking, where did you buy those very fetching corduroy epaulets? Hi, I'm Barreled Land Dudno, and when I'm stuck in a situation like this, I use new Whiffle Wet Facial Flange with its handy applicator. You can attach it to the face of your enemies, and it very, very slowly turns them inside out. This product is not yet available anywhere but Holland and Buenos Aires, but for a handful of greasy 50s and the threat of bodily harm and genital mutilation should you tell anybody, the Whiffle Wet Facial Flange can be yours. Makes a wonderful stocking filler and contains literally no gluten. Handy applicator sold separately.
Oh, turn that radio off, Petrus, son of Ilbermeyer.
Yes, Grand Yak of the Five Realms.
It's an absolute marvel delight. Okay, thank you. Right, I hereby call to order the splendid covenant of the subdimensional elk outfit of East Cheam and the outlying areas, parts of Chessington Road, Moore and Ruxley Lanes, Cherrywood, and the east half of Rokebury Sports Ground. It's wonderful to see so many of you here. Alan, especially nice that you made it all the way out despite your gaping head wound injury. And Terence, thank you for the macaroons. A delight. Right, to business. Who has the robes? I'm feeling a little underdressed up here. Cecil, wasn't that your job?
Right, yeah, it was my job. Oh, okay, yeah, all right, you got me, it was my job.
Well, where are they, Cecil? Hand them out, good chap. How am I possibly meant to slaughter a goat without the proper robes?
Well, you see, it's like this. I had just finished a ritual buttock lighting ceremony in the old park when...
Cecil, I don't need your what I did this last summer paper. Do you have the robes or do you not have the robes?
No.
Cecil, how on earth am I meant to pillage the hillside, summon the Great One, or defile the virgins without the proper attire? I mean, you wouldn't just go cooking beef bourguignon willy-nilly without the proper trousers, now would you?
Pillaging the hillside? What the fuck is that?
Shut up, Petros!
We interrupt this inane blather to let you know that the rumour that the North Koreans had threatened the highly bronzed nipples of our listeners if they downloaded this week's episode of the After Movie Dino was true, but our intrepid leader, John Cross, who cares not for the livelihood of his audience or for being threatened by imbecilic nitwits in tight-fitting uniforms and bad hair, decided to put the episode out anyway, at great personal risk to himself, but also for freedom and for babies and for kittens and whatever the hell's else. Anyway, let's do this thing and let's do it hard. To the face. Ping, hello and welcome to yet another episode of the After Movie Dino. We're going to get right on into it, except that I would like to mention that if everybody goes over to miskplumbingfixtures.bandcamp.com, that's M-I-S-C, plumbing, P-L-U-M-B-I-N-G, fixtures, F-I-X-T-U-R-E-S, .bandcamp.com. patreon.com, then you can pick up a new copy of my latest musical album, which is called Catch Up or Don't See If I Care. It's by Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. It's out now. It's got 16 glorious tracks. It's just $7, and all proceeds go towards recording more albums, making more podcasts, and generally doing more creative, cool stuff for all of you excellent people in the near future. And I'd also like to say from the very bottom of my heart, everyone here at the After Movie Diner, all the guests that we've had, and all the support that we've got, a big Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you who have both been on the show and all of you who listen. Thank you ever so much, everybody who puts time and energy into keeping the After Movie Diner going, both on this side and on your side. So thank you ever so much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Please buy the album. Please support the podcast on Patreon. And enjoy yourselves, most of all, during the silly season. And now, on with the show. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. Take a look at the 5 and 10. It's glistening once again with the candy canes and silver lanes aglow. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Toys in every store. But the prettiest sight to see is the holly that will be on your own front door. Oh, yeah. Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the After Movie Diner, and I think we've got one more before the end of the year, but this is going to be a wonderful kind of Christmassy episode for me and my old pal Jon Wallace joining us back on the show. Absolutely fantastic to have him back. We are doing the second in a long-running series of Caine and Keaton podcasts at last, and hopefully we'll plan to make them more regular in 2015. But it is my undiluted pleasure to have the master himself back on the show. He started it with me. We're ending 2014 with him. It is Signores Jon Wallace. Hello, sir.
Hello, good to be here. And I think one of these movies does have a Christmassy connection. Night Shift has a Christmassy moment in it, doesn't it?
I mean, this isn't like the Diner Christmas episode, but it'll probably be the one that comes out roughly near Christmas.
No, but I'm surrounded by... it's very Christmassy here. There's fairy lights. There's... my wife's been wrapping intricately all night.
Oh, nice.
So it feels quite Christmassy here.
Yeah, because what anyone who's listened for a long time will know that the first couple of years I was all about the special episode, and I did like big production numbers and blah 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 blah. But unfortunately now you're just going to be stuck with us two gassing about a couple of great movies, because to be honest, if you really want to hear the big production number, go back and listen to the first couple of Christmas specials we did. This one's just going to be a fun old chat between two great mates about two particularly bonkers movies, I have to say.
Yes.
But anyway, so in the lead up to talking about those two films, what have you been watching since last we spake, and how is your Christmas viewing going?
My Christmas viewing is going really excellently, actually. I've been watching Star Trek, the original series.
Oh, nice.
I don't think I have watched it since I was, 9, 10, something like that. And I was far more raised on Next Generation and Voyager. And watching the original series has been an absolute delight. It's been absolutely brilliant. I'm utterly thrilled by it, and I'm going to be writing... Weirdly, because I started off watching Space Seeds, naturally, which is the Wrath of Khan origin episode.
Sure.
And then I watched the second series one, and then I've nearly finished the second series now. I just went through the second series, which is an odd way to do things. It's brilliant. I'm thrilled by how good it is. It's just awesome, with the occasional sort of ankle-twisting misstep, obviously.
Right.
But it's been just brilliant. Other than that, I went to see Interstellar, which I did a blog about. I'm definitely going to write a blog about Star Trek, because it would just be so good to write something which is just like, I love this. These are all the things that I love about this amazing show.
So let people know where they can find your review of Interstellar, because I suggest everyone read it. It's really good.
So that's on my blog, which is thingaboutchickens.blogspot.com. blogspot.co.uk. If you go on there, there's all sorts of stuff.
You should only ever read out your blog name like Werner Herzog, because that's how.
Think about chickens. Blogspots.co.uk.
When you look into their eyes, all you see is stupidity and nothingness.
Yeah,
amazing.
And apart from that, I went to see. I happened to see something else. No, I've been watching a few different bits and pieces, but that's been the main. Oh yeah, and I finished Life on Mars as well with Hannibal, so it's been mainly telly stuff.
Nice.
But I've got some. Oh yeah, and then up at my mum's over in the lakes, I watched Captain Phillips because it was on, and I watched something else as well.
For some reason, and I know that was his real name, but isn't there a character in Monty Python who's like something Phillips Bong? Like, isn't there something?
Captain Phillips Bong.
That's it. So whenever people say Captain Phillips, I always want to go Bong.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Oh yeah, God, I watched with my mum and stepdad. I watched The Wolf of Wall Street, which was something to watch with them.
It was pretty awful.
To be honest, I just feel like it more than any other, even more than something like Casino. Actually, it really felt like someone going like, "Oh, I really want to recapture that Goodfellas feel," and not quite doing it with the whole like narration and the.
Yeah, I mean, I think Casino is a lot more successful, and if anything, I, in a weird way, prefer that to Goodfellas, which I know is kind of sacrilege, but in a weird way, I'm more interested in Casino's storyline than Goodfellas' storyline. However, I just thought Wolf of Wall Street, what blew my mind was that both DiCaprio and Scorsese have claimed in interviews since that they were making a condemning satirical piece of this guy. Like, it was meant to condemn his actions. And I thought to myself, watching the movie, I was like, at no point does it... by not showing the result of his swindling and his bullshit, and because he ends up in what he himself calls a country club, and because the guy who the movie is based on, who's this utter shit, is even in the movie at the end, it kind of feels like the movie's validating it, not condemning it in any way at all.
Well, to be honest with you, I after watching it, I thought that that its major failing is that something like Goodfellas, something like Casino, they don't really condemn those actions either. Now, both of those at the end are left sort of far. Well, I agree with you; they're far more humbled than he is at the end of Wolf of Wall Street. But the difference is that the brilliance of Casino and Goodfellas is the way they talk you through these, like, the enterprises. So the enterprise of running a casino and all of the people who are trying to swindle the casino and all the people who are working for the casino trying to stop the swindlers who are ex-swindlers and all of the shit that goes on. And it's fucking fascinating. And all of the stuff with Goodfellas about, the way they start off with this kind of crime and then they leak into this other kind of crime and then leak into the drugs. And, there's all this stuff about how the drugs is going to be the thing that finishes them off because you only have to shake hands with the guy and you go into prison. Completely fascinating. Wolf of Wall Street, it was all just about money. And if you notice, you can't make that interesting. It's just a load of numbers. And the whole way, he even says a few times in the movie, like, oh, but, so the scam works in this kind of, actually, what am I telling you this for? You're not interested in that. It's all about the money. And I'm like, well, actually, I need something to get into here. And there's nothing to really hold on to, which is why I think it leans so heavily on the... all it's got then is the sex and the drugs, and it hasn't got the criminal enterprise, which makes it interesting and makes you intrigued.
And also, if you look at something like, a lot of people condemn Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas for being a pro-drug movie, but actually there is so many horrific images that, people like laugh at or whatever, but there are so many horrific images of that movie about either the aftermath or indeed the during of taking drugs, including, vomitus and, idiotic behavior and violence and a whole bunch of stuff. And Gilliam is very careful to, like, show these things. You don't really see any real ramifications in Wolf of Wall Street of anything he's doing. And even when you see him completely and utterly blitzed out of his mind on drugs, it's hilarious. It's a phenomenally comedic performance. It's not interesting enough, not charming enough, and not well done enough that the 3.5 hours or whatever it is demands of you. Anyway, I don't know.
But when I watched that bit where he's dragging himself out of the kind of thing, it was brilliant. But all I could think in my head was, yeah, but it's not quite Devil Ether, and then we're going into the casino. I find that a lot funnier.
But the lunacy of the Wolf of Wall Street sequence is how long it goes on for. I mean, the comedic. The comedic slapstick goes on, almost in real time.
Exactly. So because there aren't those there isn't this intricate enterprise that they can actually explain and get into and everything, then you're left with a lot less. So shave it to an hour and a half.
Of course. And at the end of Goodfellas and Casino, people have died, people have gone to prison, and people are back in, Ace is back in his old bookie job or whatever at the end of Casino. And
that's true. The stakes are a lot higher, aren't they?
Pesci is dead. Pesci is fucking destroyed at the end of Casino. Ginger isn't. I forget what happened. Is she dead? I forget. But everyone in that movie has a comeuppance. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to be good, evil, bad, gets punished, blah, 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 blah. But if you're not even going to show, you could have him go to the country club and blah, 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 blah. But like you say, if you're not going to explain the scam and then show the negative ramifications of the scam as a counterbalance to all this quote-unquote comedy that's happening on the screen, there is no condemning of his actions at all. DiCaprio says, well, you're meant to watch him be all high on drugs and having all these orgies and condemn that because it's terrible. I'm like, but most people want orgies and lots of fun with all their friends and stuff. Maybe not to that excess and whatever, but when you're watching it because you're laughing at it because it's done in an extremely comedic way, you're not thinking this is reality. You're not really thinking that they had a massive orgy on a plane. You're just thinking this is funny to watch and I don't hate these people because look how funny they're being. You know what I mean? Every comedy in the world is about a mean, vicious, sarcastic, miserable bastard. Most comedies have that as their central or an egotistical, naive idiot like Ron Burgundy or someone. Everything has that as a central conceit. So we're used to watching comedy films that have kind of bastards at their... if you met them in real life, you'd be like, oh, God, this guy's awful. Alan Partridge is awful. Ron Burgundy is awful. But they're hilarious people because of everything that's going on in the movie. So I don't think it worked for me as the condemnation that they said after the movie that it was. And they seem to be having way too much fun making it. I don't think that resulted in a good movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
anyway.
and just as on Phillips, I actually switched. We hired Phillips, and I switched it off because Kevin Phillips bottom, and we hired it because he's slightly silly party, isn't he?
Yeah.
That's what it is. Slightly silly. I switched it off when I first hired it because I found it so unbelievably bleak. But then I was in the right mood to watch it up in the lakes, and I was quite surprised. It did kind of degenerate into... Well, not degenerate, but it was a lot more standard a move than I thought it was, and it didn't really say a huge amount about... It didn't say as much about the lives of the Somali guys as I thought it was going to, which I thought was odd, because the Somali guy got so many plaudits, deservedly. And yet, I don't know, I didn't really know what it was trying to say, really. Yeah. Anyway, so on to Night Shift and The Island.
Well, a quick mention about my week.
Yes, your week of wonder.
Well, it was more just a weekend, actually. It just happened to cram a lot into it. I saw The Gambler, Mark Wahlberg's The Gambler, and Selma, which is about the Bloody Sunday bridge beating that Martin Luther King's group took in the 60s and when they were trying to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama. And I had the pleasure of seeing both movies, then going to the press conference of both movies, and then going to the red carpet event for Selma. Now, I don't want to go on too much about it all because you can read the red carpet event on Movie Pilot, where you can find me under After Movie Diner on moviepilot.com. I've also posted it all over Facebook and Twitter, so you should be able to find it. I'll also put a link on aftermoviediner.com. If you're a regular visitor to there, I'll put a link on there where you can see my red carpet interviews and blah, 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 blah. I'm also doing a similar piece for the Gambler press conference, which will hopefully go up tomorrow, and a full review of the Gambler, which will hopefully go up tomorrow. But my quick capsule review is the Gambler, which is basically that it was a movie. It was a movie, and it was well made.
You definitely saw a film.
I went in, I sat down, stuff happened, and I left. It's well lit. It's well directed. It's okay edited. The soundtrack is passable. The performances are all right. You've seen them all do similar stuff before, and they turn up and do it again. The script seems to think it's saying big, weighty, lofty stuff about big, weighty, lofty, internal, thought-provoking stuff. But really, it's just an examination of an incredibly narcissistic rich boy, and you're a bit like, why do I care? It's a bit Wolf of Wall Street, actually. Like, you kind of watch it, you're kind of going, yeah, all right, but, like, why do I care? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's down $260,000 and everyone wants to like break his legs. And his mum shows up and goes, who's incredibly rich, goes, here's $260,000. Now don't lose this as well. And he's like, fuck you, mum. And she's like, I bet you're not going to say anything to me then, are you? Not even going to say thank you. No, I'm not going to say thank you. And then she gets in the car and drives off. And then he goes to Vegas and just loses that $260,000. And he goes, well, that's my mum off my back then. And I'm like, what the, like, who cares about any of this? Like, it's meant to be this whole nihilistic, fuck the world, and if I die, blah, 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 blah. It's this whole, like, and it just doesn't add up to anything, and it's 90 minutes, and it's a movie and whatever. And then Selma is really critic-proof, because you can't sit there and go, well, you know, the lighting wasn't particularly great in this scene, or it could have been edited slightly better in that scene, or whatever. Ultimately, it's a very interesting telling of this historical moment, and it's not a Oliver Stone telling of it. It's not like flashbang, manipulative image here, gratuitous shot there. It's not like that at all. It's on one hand fairly what I'm going to say is historically accurately paced, meaning that it's very, very slow for long periods of the movie, and then obviously when the tragedy of the violence happens, and then he starts to make more rousing speeches and blah, 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 blah. The end of the movie has far more style and has far more moments for the film crew to like showboat and show what they can do in terms of staging a sequence or staging a speech or staging or whatever. The script is incredible. The script has a really interesting job because it has to tell you what's going on. It has to show Martin Luther King as a human being without being like one of those things where it's like, well, he was a great man, but he had a drinking problem. Like, it's not... They don't do it that way. They do it in a very, like, subtle way, which is good. And the last tightrope thing they have to do is and the thing that I was most fascinated by, because they never do this in movies like this, and this is what really interested me, was the whole idea of Martin Luther King is obviously like the peaceful protest, right? And the whole idea of his ongoing protests were, okay, well, you know, we have these rights, but actually the rights that we've been kind of given flimsily on paper are still being denied to us. So in this case, in the case of this, it's the right to vote. And although they legally on the books have the right to vote, when an African American goes to the polling booth to register to vote, it is being made so unbelievably hard for them and so impossible for them to actually be able to register to vote that they never get the chance to vote. And if you're not registered to vote in America, you can't sit on a jury. And if you can't sit on a jury, then it's not a review of your peers. And if it's not a review of your peers, then it's easier to convict a black guy than it is a white guy. And it has this whole knock-on effect, which is also really interesting to think about. But the interesting thing about his peaceful protest is, in order to put pressure on Johnson and George Wallace, who Tim Roth plays, who's the governor of Alabama, King knows that they have to do this like big march, but he knows that by doing this big march, people will die. And in fact, he knows that every day they are doing these protests, or they are occupying hotels, or they're walking out onto the street. Although it is legal what they are doing, and although it is peaceful what they are doing, he knows in his heart people will die, or people will be injured, or, you know what I mean? And in an interesting way, he needs people to be injured. The last thing Johnson wants is on the front page of international newspapers, because obviously in the 60s, like, world travel and all that, and world news is coming to the fore, you know. The last thing Johnson needs is pictures of blacks in the South being beaten with their heads bouncing off pavements. But that's what he gets. And it's this interesting thing where Martin Luther King is saying, like, I know I have to put them in harm's way, but every single time one of them is injured or one of them dies or anything like that, any of his protest friends, it hits him like a fucking rock. He cannot cope with it. And he is constantly getting tired of having to lead this movement that is causing so much bloodshed. And that's the fascinating thing about the movie. And that's the thing that the movie does better than anything. And
so who plays Martin Luther King?
He's played by David Oyelowo.
Oh, I know.
And that's how you pronounce
yeah.
it. And he's an English guy from Oxford, and he's not only that, but he's like this English guy who's very kind of svelte and put together. And obviously, as Martin Luther King, he's a bit fatter and he has the mustache. And it's a real transformation without being like, oh look, he put on weight. And
how is because my personal favourite thing about your week was that you met Tim Roth in the lift and shook his hand. And
yes.
we love Tim Roth for, if anyone hasn't seen it, go out and find it now. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, which is the movie adaptation of the Tom Stoppard play. It's superb, and Tim Roth is in that with Gary Oldman. Best thing either of them ever did, arguably.
Yes.
And you shook his hand. And so, how is he in the movie?
He's really good in the movie. He obviously doesn't get a lot to do, and because he's only in a few scenes. Things like Johnson and Roth, Johnson and Wallace, and things like that. They have their part in the film, but they're not in it for very much. But he's really good in it. He plays a good kind of slimy racist without being a caricature. And his right-hand man is Stephen Root, who's also really good in the movie. And
is Oprah in it?
Oprah's in it, but only in a cameo. She plays a real person. In fact, most people play real people in the movie who did truthfully stand up. And at one of they have a peaceful. They find out that they can the sheriff's office of Selma, Alabama, cannot arrest them for walking down the road. They can only arrest them if they congregate on the actual steps of the courthouse. So they walk all the way down the road to the front of the courthouse and then sit on the road outside the courthouse. And when they're forced to sit on the road, the sheriff's office comes down and they're like, sit down, get down, get down. They're like beating people down onto the thing. And Oprah refuses to sit down and stands up and wallops the sheriff around the back of the head or something. It was a real incident that happened anyway. But so no, she's in it for a couple of scenes. Roth's great, and the best thing about meeting Roth, the thing that it's going to make you happy as anything. And if you've seen the video on my review of the red carpet, you'll get a very sense of this as well. Is that when you meet Roth, he's Roth. He's every type of Roth you want him to be. You know what I mean? He's got that thing where he's just I can't, he's still got the cheeky cockney chappy thing, but he's also got that thing where this is my life, and it's amazing. He doesn't come across as arrogant, stuck up, aggressive. He has no star quality other than he's just abundantly Roth, just very all right, mate, how you doing? You know what I mean? He doesn't have any of the trappings of stardom. He's just all right, mate, I'm Tim Roth. All right, he's just Roth. I can't really describe it any other way. He was pleasingly Roth. That's all I'm going to say. You know what I mean?
Excellent, good.
And he has the most unusual eyes I've ever seen. They're absolutely spellbinding in the fact that they really are. In the centre of them, obviously there's all the light, so his pupils were very small. So he had very small black pupils, but then he had like this orangey, like orangey, yellowy, greeny thing that then had a really strongly defined blue outline. So it was like this. He had blue eyes, but then orange in the middle of it. It was utterly. I was like, wow, his fucking eyes are insane. It looked like he was wearing contact lenses. That's what it looked like.
That's super cool that you met Tim Roth, and that's really, really something.
Yeah, if anyone's interested, the interviews also. I spoke to. Who's the great guy? I spoke to Wendell Pierce from Homicide: Life on the Street, and also Treme and some other stuff. He was amazing. And I spoke with Tyler Perry, who's obviously very famous, and Ava DuVernay, who directed it. And that was the big coup about the movie. Because sadly there's too few of them. It's directed by not only an African American but African American female, which is a big coup for the movie. So it's very cool.
Awesome, yeah. Right, all right then. Well, that's obviously super, super cool. But I think we should now move on to our Caine and Keaton.
Yes.
Do you agree? Do you concur?
I do concur, sir. Yes, I just wanted to get some of that down on record while I had the mouthpiece.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. I mean, everyone should clearly go and check those out. Go and check out your review and watch the videos and all, because I know I will, definitely.
Cool.
So we decided to do 2 movies based on. I certainly wanted to look at Night Shift because. Because it's one of these curios. So the genius thing about doing these is that by picking certain actors, these curios sort of crop up. You go, hey, what? And this is Ron Howard's Night Shift. Is Ron Howard's first movie?
No, he'd done Grand Theft Auto for Roger Corman first.
Oh, right. Okay.
Is what he'd done.
Oh, really?
Yes. I mean, this isn't long into his career, but it's not his first. Of course, it's not going to show me.
Well, it feels like in many respects, it feels like it could be a first directorial effort.
Grand Theft Auto he did. Then he did 3 TV movies, and then he did this one. So this was his second theatrical movie. And it was the one he would make before Splash, which would be his big splash onto the scene.
I see. So we might as well do that first. The Caine movie we're doing is The Island, which we'll get on to in a minute.
Watch it.
Chuck Lumley works nights. He's a civil servant. And so is Bill. Chuck and Bill have a very strange partnership. They also have a happy staff. Their business is growing. Their customers have no complaints. And the future looks good. However, Chuck is a little too serious about his work. So, Bill is teaching him to take things easier. After all, night work can be fun. You just have to know where to look for it. Night shift. It makes the day seem dead by comparison.
So to briefly explain the plot of Night Shift, such as it is that Henry Winkler, in a performance that I really did not see coming from Winkler, is a sort of downtrodden schlub who is a
it's Woody Allen-esque, isn't it?
Well, we'll get on to that. So he's a schlubby individual who used to work in the financial sector, quit it because he found it all too stressful, very put upon, very downtrodden, with a woman who isn't sort of, the relationship is all wrong in sort of, you know, it isn't, they don't connect, and everything's all a bit, and everyone sort of pushes him around. And he works in a mortuary. And at the beginning of the movie, he is told that he is being moved onto the night shift at the mortuary, and that he's about to take on a new partner who is zany Michael Keaton, in a very early role for him as well. So basically what you have is you have Ron Howard directing Henry Winkler and Michael Keaton, which is a very strange combination. You know, it's one of these things where back at the time it would have seemed weird enough, but looking back at it now, it's like, my God, really? So we had to watch it. And basically what happens throughout the film...
Well, Henry Winkler, of course, from Happy Days, that Ron Howard would have worked with on Happy Days. And if you want a role of this kind of... He shows up as a manic sidekick and, like, mixes the whole thing up a bit. Keaton, you know, he's your guy. He's your man. He's the guy who's going to come in and do...
He's your guy.
Yeah.
He's your guy. But to briefly explain the plot, what happens is Winkler has a neighbour played by Shelley Long, who is a prostitute, and he gets to know her, and through her being sort of beaten up, etc., zany Keaton comes up with the idea of, well, look, all these night walkers have like horrible pimps who take all their profits and stuff. We are alone in this mortuary all night. We have this whole place to ourselves. Why don't we become pimps?
Yeah.
And run them out of this place.
This is a wacky 80s comedy that starts with a pimp tied to a chair, thrown out of a window. That's how the movie starts, to like a kind of like jolly, wacky soundtrack. And you're a bit like, well, what the hell is this that I'm watching? By the way, Agent Muntz from Homicide. What's his name? Richard Belzer, which is hilarious. So her pimp gets killed. And then, and the other thing is that wacky Michael Keaton has found out a way that he can run a chauffeur's office out of the mortuary using the hearse and dressing it up as a... So figuring out that he can run two businesses at once and her pimp dying is where they kind of come up with it.
That's where things come together. I mean, another lovely little spot, if you're watching the film, is at the beginning. There's this very strange pimp dying scene. There's a couple of guys playing a sort of gay street alley basketball, one of whom is the guy out of Police Squad who is the boxer in the boxing episode, which is one of the best Police Squad episodes ever, who likes to recite poetry such as, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm going to break your face. It's that guy. I love that guy, and he should have had a massive career, that guy. I absolutely love him. He's also in Die Hard as well as one of the Agent Johnsons.
Oh, it's Grandel Bush. His name is Grandel Bush, and he's also in License to Kill, the James Bond film. And he has been with Robert Davi, who he's in Die Hard with. They play Agent Johnson and Agent Johnson, no relation. He has been with Robert Davi in not one, but three movies. I mean,
he's amazing, that guy. I love him. It's a really odd film. I mean, the whole setup is, I mean, not in a million years would this film get made now. I mean, it's the way it tries to run alongside sort of... Keaton is playing one of those classic 80s figures of like, there's nothing normal about this guy. Everything this guy does is completely wacky and out of left field. Like you say, he starts running this chauffeur business using the hearses by putting like a top hat over the light and slapping a sticker over the hearse sign or whatever, and then driving people around, which is all nice enough. And with a sort of, as you say, a sort of effort at a Woody Allen-y central figure in Henry Winkler, which I guess kind of fits because it's this sort of wacky sex comedy thing. I guess that's sort of where they were shooting. But then they also have...
Well, he's playing a nebbish. He's playing against type. He has some amazing... He's clearly meant to be... I mean, Winkler is Jewish, and he's clearly meant to have that, like, nervous Jewish comedy about him. There's an amazing line where his wife's going on about something about his mother. And he says, "Why do you still listen to my mother? This is the same woman who attends a seance every week since my father died, just to yell at him," which is an amazing line. He has another line where his wife says, "Are you excited, Chuck?" And he goes, "Like the French when Lindbergh landed in Paris." There's some amazing lines. And the script, certainly before it tries to have a point, when it's just introduction of the characters, the script is bowling me along, and I'm just grinning like a fool. I really enjoy it.
That's the thing. It does have some really good lines in it, but but to be honest, the whole. I thought perhaps was a little bit weak was that the Winkler Shelley Long the romance thing between him and Shelley Long. It was just a bit weak. Whereas
the fact of the matter is, right, I know they try halfway through the movie to kind of go, well, they're not really 42nd Street whores. They're high-class escorts who go to hotels and sleep with businessmen. They're not really hookers. There's a point during the movie where they're like, shit, we've got to kind of show them taking them out onto the streets. We can't really show the kind of fucking dives in reality that these poor ladies would have been in. So instead we're going to pretend that really they're whining and dining fancy men in the Ritz. But the weirdest thing about the movie, the oddest thing about it, is that when you set a movie in New York in the 80s with prostitution, crime and so on as your backdrop, and you start the movie with a kind of, oddly, just an oddly placed death scene of a guy strapped to a chair and hurled out a fucking window, but then it goes night shift. You're like, what the fuck am I watching? Right, which is totally bonkers. But when you have to glaze over the fact that what you're watching is a film set in this kind of crime world, yet at the same time the whole plot of the film hinges on the fact that it's set in the crime world. But so the whole romance with him and Shelley Long is kind of odd because she's fucked mad cowboys who like to whip her, and she gets beaten up in elevators. It's just this sort of, and when she comes round to cook breakfast for him, she has no problem derobing and showing off her ass and stuff. And you just kind of think, this is really odd, because on one point I'm being asked to sympathise with her and her plight, but on the other hand I'm asked to sexually objectify her, one of her tricks.
That's the
it's moral compass. It's all over
the whole zany sex comedy thing. It doesn't quite work with just flat out pimping. It's just for me it didn't quite ever fit. And the best bits were the incidental little bits of comedy about working in a mortuary. Do you know what I mean? This sort of lunatic and Nebbish. That's a nice little setup. And I know it's a redundant thing to say because it's half the bloody movie, but I just felt like it could have used something apart from the pimping, because you just think well, like you say, there's this. It kind of keeps on shifting between objectification and then sort of ho-ho sex comedy on the other side, and you sort of don't really know which way to go with it. It feels all a bit confused. But some of the lines, when Keaton first starts working there, Keaton is it's one of those early roles where Keaton is half the jokes are misfiring, but when they hit, they're good. And that's totally fair enough because it's an early role. But there's a really good bit where Winkler picks up one of the forms that Keaton has filled out, and it says, and he goes name of deceased, something Polish. that's a really good line. And I really like all those shots of what the best things about these movies is you go my God, it was only 30 years ago, and just look at the state of New York. You just, all the shots of the city, the subway and all these kinds of things, you think, my God, it's a really rough place,
Oh, yeah. No, when they say that they cleaned up New York, they, cleaned up New York. And the thing that you don't realise is when you used to watch movies that took place on a city bus or had a city subway in it or whatever, and there was, graffiti everywhere and, punks and pimps and all this. When I watched movies like that as a kid, I was always like, oh, that's set dressing and that's costuming and that's trying to make it out to be like rougher and worse than it is. If anything, they played all that shit down. If anything, hanging around 42nd Street back in the day, you were liable to get like mugged, stabbed, or like tried to be picked up for sex. You know, there were your three options.
And there's other nice bits in it as well. Like there's a really nice, your Woody Allen comment is really spot on actually, because the best bits are when they do like a really good like Woody Allenish kind of little lines and visual gags as well. There's a really good visual gag where Winkler, as part of his life, and these are the kind of gags that genius kind of gag where it's really funny, half because of the character, and because he's this downtrodden guy who's always doing what other people want him to do. There's this brilliant bit where he's on the subway, and this busker comes up to him and like plays sax at him a load, and he drops coins in the guy's hat, and then that just encourages the busker, and the busker like plays out some more at him, so it just sort of puts him on like side.
No, but the busker plays really bad. Like, the busker's playing nice music. He gives him some money, and then the busker thinks, if I play really bad music, he'll give me more money to go away.
So Winkler...
so the busker starts going like... like on the saxophone. It's amazing.
Like,
it's really
I have
funny.
to put an end to this somehow. Reaches out his checkbook and writes the guy a check, which I just thought was a really nice little gag. It was great. There's another bit as well, where, which I really liked again, was very Woody Allen, where, as you say, Shelley Long is disrobed in his kitchen and he dabs at his face with bread instead of handkerchief, which I thought was really good as well.
There's loads of bits like that. Like, it wasn't... I almost wish it hadn't had a plot. Like, I almost wish it had really just been Night Shift, that they'd just been, like, hanging out and he'd maybe worked out that his girlfriend... shouldn't be for him. His fiancée was wrong for him.
I mean, there's another good bit as well with I like when they've left the prison, and one of the I think it's Shelley Long maybe spits at Henry Winkler and he goes like, "Did you see that? She spat at me." And Keaton says, "And after you were deloused."
No, his fiancée spits at him. His fiancée spits at him. Did you see that? After you were deloused.
For me, it was a bit of a miss with some really nice bits in it. I just say that, but just because all of the like montage of them like making money and having the zany like pimping thing going on, it was all just a bit throwaway, and Shelley Long really doesn't have much of a part. I mean, if you compare it with something like Trading Places and Jamie Lee Curtis, where at least she's got a really good, meaty, attitudey, she's a real person, and she's great. Like, she's really, Jamie Lee Curtis in Trading Places is really watchable and like totally.
Well, she has street smarts.
But just her performance.
She has street smarts.
Super watchable, and she totally holds her own with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, which is a big deal, big deal to do. And it's much more of a part. And I just felt that the whole pimp section of it was just a bit, throwaway. But like I say, there are some really nice things.
The time it lost me. The time it lost me, if it lost me at any point, was the frat party in the in the mortuary. I'm just a bit like, oh, did you spot Kevin Costner is in that bit, by the way? A very young Kevin Costner is in that frat party bit. But that's where it really kind of lost me, because I'm like, okay, I can kind of buy this up until a point, but then this big frat party, I was just like, well, it's kind of a bit needless, and it doesn't really tell us any more about the character. And also, the whole thing, there's a really weird bit, and I'm sure it was just because it wasn't really in the script, but you've got this whole thing that one of the things that should have been a threat throughout the movie was the idea that Richard Belzer and his pal, who work for a territorial crime syndicate or whatever, who are trying to get money out of all the pimps, eventually catch up to them. But because we don't see their story, because we don't really engage in that, because the movie is mainly light fluff for 7/8 of it, even light fluff set amongst this kind of grim world, it's still light fluff. There's only 2 scenes that establish that these guys are like looking for them, and one of them is where they go, well, the other pimp's dead, and yet all the prostitutes are still going out. They must have a new pimp. And we're like, well, okay, that's information we already know. So that's a bit odd. And then next thing they know, they've shown up at the mortuary and they're like hassling Winkler. And that kind of creates this sort of not really a climax with this sort of bizarre shootout and whatever. And then from that moment, it really does lose me, because Winkler and Keaton go their separate ways, and Long goes their separate ways, and then they all kind of meet up again in this Hawaiian-themed casino sex club run by Joe Spinell, which is like a really bizarre, tacked-on scene at the end. And that's the bit where I was kind of, all right, just finish already, because it's like an hour and 45 minutes or something, and that last 15 minutes. It is all a climax the movie doesn't need. If you're going to have the shootout climax, have the shootout climax and then have them all be friends at the end when they didn't die. Or if you're going to have the weird sex club, Hawaiian-themed, whatever thing, have that be the climax. But it was too many strands and too many climaxes for a movie that really didn't have that much plot. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, absolutely, yeah. But that's the thing. I just think that's the main thing, is that the sex comedy thing is actually like never funny to me anyway. Like the sex comedy stuff is very rarely funny. Like the best stuff in like the weakest stuff in Everything You Always Know About Sex We're Afraid to Ask is the regular sex comedy stuff. The best stuff in that is, you know, the sheep romance and and I don't know, I guess, God, I can't even remember any other bits in that, but that's the best bit in that. And all the stuff with, like, him being chased by a giant tit across whatever and dressed up as a sperm and all that kind of stuff, it's not that great. And there's all of this sex comedy stuff, you know, it just... You sit there, as an Englishman, you sit there and you just think, like, well, I'm kind of treading in carry-on waters here, pretty much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be like Carry-On Mortuary. It could easily be Carry-On Mortuary.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is, basically.
It's just that it has a much better, like, New York-y script to it.
Yeah, and there's a really nice sort of the apartment-y stuff where it just feels like someone's trying to pull it in one direction and someone's trying to pull it in another direction. Do you know what I mean? In terms of there's that like the New York nebbish, like zany friend and the pretty neighbour who he falls in love with and all that sort of stuff is quite nice over that side. And then there's the frat party pimping, pimpmobile stuff, which is all just a bit throwaway.
Yeah.
But, you know, saying that, I think it is worth seeing for Winkler's performance, because I've certainly not seen... I mean, it's not spectacular, but it is good. And I've not seen him do another performance like that.
No, and it kind of bothered me, because I would have really gone for a series of Winkler movies with him playing... It's kind of part Jack Lemmon and part Woody Allen. There's like a bit Lemmon to it as well. The kind of hand-wringing, kind of sweaty, like kind of neurotic kind of thing. It's a bit of a Lemon to him. So I could have seen Winkler have quite a successful career doing like that in a few good movies.
Yeah, he's brilliant, Winkler. I just think he's got so much potential, which has never quite been...
No, I mean, he's great as the Fonz, and he's done a few, like, standout roles in movies, but really nothing of
He's
much.
amazing in Arrested Development. He's brilliant in Arrested Development, his part in that.
Yeah. Well, of course, again, Ron Howard, you see, so they're clearly, like, good friends, and they clearly, like, Howard has always stuck him somewhere or stuck his brother in, and, of course, Clint Howard does show up, and this Hollywood's most attractive man, Clint Howard, shows up as one of the frat guys. It's all fun.
I mean, you know what movie... To be honest, neither of us should have been surprised by where it went, because you can tell by the poster, can't you? By the cover for this movie.
But I have a real soft spot for those movie posters.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
but it's exactly like a police academy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's in that vein.
They're all like that weird cartoon drawing of an ensemble cast thing.
Like all jumping out of a cab.
Tumbling out of a hearse.
A hearse, right.
or like Whoops Apocalypse or anything like that, like all those kind of cartoony covers, which, like you say, I have a soft spot for, but it does make you go, okay, yeah, I know where I am.
See, whereas you thought it was a miss with some hits, I'm going to go the other way and say it was a hit with some misses. Because I think that I put it in and I was really like, first of all, I knew nothing about the film. Second of all, I thought Keaton was going to have more or less a cameo in it, or more or less like an extendedly small part. I didn't think he was going to be like the second lead. I don't know why I thought that. I have no idea why or where that came from, but that was in my head. And thirdly, I was just like, I really don't want to... Like, if this was a good comedy, if this was a Trading Places or a Planes, Trains and Automobiles or something, I would have heard more about it. And so, because I went in with a kind of, all right, I got to watch this movie, I was genuinely lifted when Winkler was doing his Woody Allen, Jack Lemmon bit, and then in came Keaton. I was like, well, God knows what Keaton's going to do. And he came in doing his I'm wacky bit, and he's so charming, Keaton, and he's so, like, you so want him to succeed because he's kind of this interesting screen presence that I was just kind of picked up and carried along with.
That's the thing. I thought Keaton is, I mean, we should say, because it is a Keaton and Caine episode, Keaton is very, very charming in it. I just thought that he... I just thought it was like an early performance. I just thought it was like hits and misses kind of a thing, but consistently charming and fun to watch.
I'll tell you what the big problem is that Winkler's character arc is meant to be nebbish with a shrewish fiancée who's totally wrong for him, meets crazy friend, and by the end, crazy friend has learned to be a little more sensible, and nebbish guy has learned to be a little bit more relaxed and free, right? He doesn't have an arc. He goes from nebbish to leave me alone, Keaton, I never want to see you again. Keaton leaves, to then one day when he's in his building and he gets the wrong sandwich, which is a running gag throughout the movie, it's like, no, I don't want to send the sandwich back. He gets the wrong sandwich and says to the guy, you've given me the wrong sandwich. The guy's abusive to him, and Winkler rules the day and overtakes him. So he doesn't have a character arc. He has a total 180 shift from, like, being completely, oh, no, I couldn't, to... like, finger pointing everyone and, like, I'm walking here and, aggressive. Yeah. There's no, like, character arc. And all the bits that are meant to be his character arc, him becoming more confident, him winning Shelley Long back, him and Keaton becoming friends and whatever, is all crammed into that very busy, weird last 15 minutes, instead of being drifted throughout the movie. So throughout the movie, you have this thing where every time you think Keaton's wackiness has kind of reached Winkler, and Winkler would be relaxing a little bit, he's getting tenser and tenser and tenser. So this kind of repetitive feel to the second act of the movie where he keeps telling Keaton to fuck off, and Keaton's like, why aren't you more relaxed yet? And it kind of... in the script, they needed to spread out his arc better. That's what the problem
absolutely true.
Is with it. But you can see... It feels like a first attempt. It feels like a first attempt direction. It feels like first attempt performances, except maybe Winkler, who's a bit more tuned. And it feels a bit like a first screenplay because it doesn't feel molded and tight enough.
No.
But who good nonetheless.
Who was it written by?
It was written by a chap, several people, one called Lowell Gans and one called Babaloo Mandel. Babaloo Mandel, who wrote Parenthood and A League of Their Own and City Slickers and City Slickers 2 and Gung Ho, which Howard and Keaton would join up with in 86.
What about the other guy?
He also wrote Splash. And okay, so Babaloo Mandel has worked a lot. And Lowell Gans became a producer and also worked on Parenthood, Robots. Oh, so they must write together all the time. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
City Slicker.
So
Parenthood.
So it is sort of, it's an early. This is all a lot of people finding their way, which is fair enough.
Oh, now that's interesting. Gans and I don't know if Mandel as well, but Gans wrote some of the Odd Couple TV series, which is very similar to kind of this. They also wrote Bustin' Loose, which was another kind of TV series, and Making It. So they come from TV. So that, you know, which of course the actors all come from TV as well. So that's okay. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're old. Like they did Laverne and Shirley and Joni Loves Chachi and stuff. So, okay, they're old hands in it. Basically, they're old like Hollywood. They're probably like a couple of old like Jewish guys. I'm going to write another movie with like a mixed match couple, like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, fair enough.
Yeah, well, there it is. Okay, and then jumping over to something that is completely different in every possible way, and that is The Island, starring Michael Caine and David Warner. And it's completely bonkers from start to finish.
The Caribbean. A vacationer's paradise. And yet this region was once a stronghold for outcasts, thieves, and murderers. A savage race that vanished hundreds of years ago. But what if there were survivors? And what if they kept their existence a secret from the outside world? What if someone found out? The island, where civilization as we know it has taken a bizarre turn.
Who are you? I mean, all of you. Are you some kind of religious cult?
If I'd wanted to hit you, I could have hit you.
How dare you speak to your father like that?
You're not my father.
Stop this make-believe. Fire! Pirates? I know it sounds crazy, but you better believe me.
All those who have discovered the island have never been seen again. The Island, the super thriller from the author of Jaws and The Deep.
Find the mainland man. Cut his throat. Mayday! Mayday! You guys wouldn't believe what happened!
Now, the most terrifying thing in the water is the island.
I don't know how to explain it very well, but basically Michael Caine plays a New York journalist who has a son from an estranged wife who we never meet and is going through a divorce, and the son, he's always promising the son stuff but never giving the son really what he promises, and he's always like switching on him. And he wants to do a piece on the Bermuda Triangle or that area because boats keep going missing. And in fact, we see a kind of horror-like beginning where there's these like three fat old guys fishing in the ocean, and then this like weird craft shows up with a shadowy figure in it with an axe, and like this kind of gory opening horror thing, like the movie's going to be a slasher film or something. Then it cuts to like ages of like Caine bumbling around with his son, and like they go down to Florida, and you know, then they charter a boat, and then they charter a plane, and then all of a sudden the plane like crashes and blows up like it. And I was watching it going, because they get a pilot now. Yeah, the pilot's like one of these like, you know, scurvy.
I like that guy.
He's amazing, but like this like dishevelled, shambolic, probably a bit of a drinker, salty sea dog type who happens to fly like a plane out to the islands, which is like a bit comedic and a bit weird. But then it's not like the plane is brought down. It's just that the pilot, isn't aware of how to land? Like, it's really odd. He just crashes the plane. I was like, what am I watching?
Well, what happens is the whole thing is bizarre. But the explanation is there's a guy on the runway sort of waving a flag at them, and he's trying to signal them that their wheels aren't down. That's the sort of primitive airfield way that you show someone that their wheels aren't down. Is, you know, like fire a flare or wave a flag.
It's entirely.
But it has no place in the story. It has no place in the story whatsoever. It just happens.
It just happens. Well, the reason it has a place in the story is they're stranded on this island at that point.
Yeah, but they could have been just as stranded. Like, the way the story goes, there is no need for the plane to explode. It's just like they had, basically they went along, they started filming, and then someone said, tell you what, I've got this plane you can blow up if you like. We were going to blow it up for this other picture, and it's there. So it's sat right there doing nothing. So if you want a plane explosion, I can give that to you.
But it's the idea that Caine is... And also... Caine is playing the whole thing like he's asleep. Well, we'll get on to that. Anyway, so they're on this island. There's, like, mumblings of, like, people being killed and blah, 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 blah. And this island is all sort of primitive and weird and whatever. Caine wants to charter a boat further out to see where the other boats disappeared. And when he does, they are set upon by pirates, essentially. But we find out that they are, in fact, like a long living, like almost, there's several generations of these pirates have lived on this island, and they speak like this weird broken English. And
yeah, they speak a sort of patois, and they've lived there since George III times.
Right.
And it's implied that he's descended from, I think it's Blackbeard. They have the like flag. Someone has read up on Caribbean pirates, basically, and they've gone. And the whole movie is, you can explain the whole plot of the movie is, someone has read a book about pirates and gone, oh my God, that's cool. I'll write a movie which is, what if a pirate community had survived for hundreds of years and still went around being pirates in the present day? And Michael Caine and his kids, after the plane blows up, for no reason, stumble across said pirates and get taken prisoner, and events unfold.
Yes. But the weirdest thing about it is Caine played... The weirdest thing about the whole movie is Caine, because he plays the whole thing like he's emotionally asleep. Because... he's in a plane crash with his kid, and the plane blows up, and I think all he does is go, what the bloody hell do you think you're playing at? And then goes back to being like asleep again for the rest of the movie. He is kidnapped.
I could not agree with you more.
He's kidnapped, forced to be a sex slave, watches his son be taken under the wing of David Warner, basically going, hello, I'm a pirate. Like, that's all David Warner is doing throughout this whole movie, in the most spindly limbed, ridiculous way. Hello, I'm a pirate. Meanwhile, he's insidiously, like, taking Caine's son under his wing and trying to force his son to drink blood, and there's various other rituals he has to do. All the while, Caine is, like, chained up and being forced to bonk this like weird Nell-like woman who's like the last woman of the tribe, who kind of barely speaks and covers herself in like daub, green, like muddy daub and stuff. And Caine looks literally like he's on some heavy sedatives. He never so much as shouts. I'm like, when is Caine going to pick up a machete, shout, and start fucking like taking back the night? Never happens.
No.
The last 15 minutes, Caine takes back the night, but he still does it like he's fucking zombified.
I mean, I think we both knew when we started to do a Caine and Keaton season that there would be a large number of Caine movies where he is basically comatose the whole way through. He is famous for, barely being asked to show up for like half of the 80s
but
and 90s.
I've seen The Hand, which was his other attempt at like bonkers early 80s horror, and in that he actually fucking at least shows an emotion.
In some he does, but from what I understand, I mean, we will learn more as we go through the series.
We will learn, I think.
We will learn. But I think that I would be very surprised if we didn't watch at least 3 movies where he's like this. Because you're right, the whole way through, the most horrendous stuff is happening. I mean, for instance, he goes with them to... Now, first of all, I've got to say, I am totally with the whole idea of pirates, like proper...
I liked the movie. Before people think I don't like the movie, I enjoyed the nuttiness of the movie. And I enjoyed
but I think it's a really good, it's a really strong little, like you say, very odd the way the film starts out, because it sets it up so you think, oh, I'm watching a horror movie. It's a horror movie. Like it just sets up and you go like, oh, I'm watching a horror movie, and then it goes to this totally other place, which is a very, very weird tonal shift right at the beginning of the film. Very odd. But I'm really with the whole. So what if pirates had existed? So they go out in these little fishing boats and they do raids, and Caine goes with them on a raid where they like butcher a load of people.
Yeah,
and like you say, there's just absolutely no response from the man.
At one point, the big dramatic scene in the movie is that his kid, who you always assume is probably, because we've established early on in a bizarre scene in a shooting range, that not only was Michael Caine in the military, so therefore like Michael Caine has gun shooting knowledge, but is now a pacifist. So that's what we learn about his character. And I would just say, like, just in general, what's passive? I mean, he's just passive throughout the whole film. But anyway, his son is a crack shot, like a natural shot. So when he's taken by the pirates and Warner is taking him under the wing and they're going on these raids, you know, the assumption is always going to be my son is going to be forced to kill someone, right? Which is going to be like the big dramatic thing that's going to make Caine go, no! So his son is forced by David Warner to like shoot at a guy who's climbing up the mast of his ship. And I love the fact that it's like this enormous big galleon that's like off the pirating days, but they're using it for like smuggling coke, which makes no sense at all because it's like the slowest boat on the seas. He wouldn't use it to smuggle anything. I mean, except maybe people wouldn't be like, I bet that pirate boat has coke in it. Anyway, he's forced at one point to shoot, and maybe there has coke on it because we're not meant to mourn their deaths. I don't know. Maybe we're meant to be okay with the fact that they shoot a bunch of coke dealers. But he's forced to shoot a guy up on the mast, and I was like, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to miss it, and then David Warner's going to get angry, and Caine's going to have to defend him against David Warner, or is he actually going to shoot the guy and it be a big dramatic scene, and Caine used that as his impetus to like get Warner? Well, he shoots the guy, and it's literally a shot of Caine, who looks like the guys at the back of the Sermon on the Mount in Life of Brian, who are kind of going, hello? Like, there's literally a long shot of Caine over by the end of the boat, where he kind of goes, well, that happened then, and then he like walks off, like, and gets a flare gun. Like, there's nothing.
There's a scene right at the beginning, but I mean, the character's behaviour the whole way through is completely nutty. Anyway, I mean, it kind of has to be for the movie.
I wanted to say that Caine's character is not a particularly good character anyway, because he's not a particularly good father, not a particularly good journalist. He's irresponsible, reckless.
He's a shocking decision maker.
Yeah, shocking.
Because there's this whole thing where all these people are disappearing in sort of grisly circumstances out on this so basically there's the sea of disappearance. And Michael Caine decides that the first thing he's going to do is take his kid out in a tiny, vulnerable fishing boat to the Sea of Disappearance, smoke a cigar, kick back, and do some fishing, which is all totally bizarre. And then there's this opening scene where they're out at the Sea of Disappearance, and his kid spots a body in the water, and that was the first time where Caine's like sleepiness. Like you say, like sedated performance, sort of grated, because you went because Caine's just like, oh right, yeah, there's, it looks like a girl. Oh right, there's a girl, like and he's reading out a script like sub read through in a rehearsal room. I mean, it properly is like he's not reading the lines as they are written, and if you were the writer, you'd be like, for fuck's sake, Caine! You're seeing a young girl floating around with a life jacket on in the middle of the sea, and the whole thing is shot spooky, and you can just see this vague figure
and then
floating
the other
around.
Monster guy comes
and it
out
should
of the water.
be this, and it should be this incredibly tense moment. But Caine is just like, he's barely there.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if this is all part of his, because he was a very strange figure in the 80s. I mean, I remember going, and he was for a long old time before like people like Nolan rescued him and everything. And I remember like buying his like, not a lot of people know that books and all this kind of a thing. Like there's a point where that was making as much money as films. It's a strange bloke. And I just want, and he clearly is a strange bloke, because a lot of films he's pretty famous for barely turning up to. And in this one, he, I really feel like he turned up. And I mean, who directed this thing?
Oh, it's directed by Michael Ritchie, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Who did what?
Michael Ritchie did Fletch, The Golden Child, The Bad News Bears, Fletch
Wow.
Lives, Wildcats, The Survivors.
And where does this come in his... Is this early in his career? Is this...
No, it's kind of middle of the road. This is the movie he makes. He makes this, then he makes Student Bodies, which was like a kind of horror slasher comedy in the 80s that was sort of fairly forgettable. Then he does The Survivors, then he does Fletch. So this is, 5 years before Fletch?
Well, it feels like Michael Caine turned up to him on the first day and said, here's how it's going to go. We're going to have... You'll have 2 shots of every scene. And I will finish at 5 o'clock each day. And there will be no debate about when I have done the take. And then, do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like he turned up and went like, you're going to get this from me, and that's your lot, and don't expect any more. Like, the whole performance is like that. And it's a shame because it does feel like... I think there's a good movie there. I mean, there are things which are a bit bizarre. Like, there's a scene which should be amazing, which is the sort of second boat raid that they do near the end of the film. The second boat raid, and it's kind of ruined because they put this like 50s swashbuckler movie music over it.
Right.
It's just like sort of Time Bandits music or something like that, and it really ruins. What if they didn't? If they just had no music, it would be an unbelievably tense, like sort of hand-to-hand boat fight. That would be completely amazing. I think it would be amazing if they just got rid of the music. So that's very strange that it's there. But I do think he drags it down a bit. I do think that he keeps on throwing you by, like you say, just being completely dead behind the eyes. And to be honest, if this is the guy that he's playing and the kid shoots someone in the mask, but I'm not surprised if this is this kid's genes, this kind of dead-eyed response to anything from someone, being beheaded to summarily executed and tipped off into the Caribbean, then I'm not surprised the kid's a nutter.
No, I agree. And I think that the whole thing that Caine does on the second boat thing, and we won't necessarily spoil the ending because I do think people should watch it, but there is something that Caine does where basically he is meant to finally lose it, right? And that's all I'm going to say. But because there's been no build-up in his performance, the so-called final losing thing plays off really weird because he goes from being like this like debonair New York journalist at the beginning, like being all suave and whatever, to a bit like a trapped accountant in the middle of the movie. He's doing nothing.
Yeah, like utterly passive.
Utterly boring and passive, to then kind of being Rambo for 5 minutes, and it just doesn't work. Like, if there was build-up and if there was emotions, and if everything his son was forced to do and everything he was forced to do had really like ground him down and ground him down and ground him down, because clearly the character's written as a pacifist who's seen wartime but doesn't want to relive it and blah blah blah. Like, that's how it's written. It's written that there's this character there who's seen hardships, doesn't want to relive them, is this liberal New York guy. The fact that his son wants a gun should be cause for concern, and instead it's just this plot point so that later on they can go, oh, we've got a gun, this is whatever. But then they never a cause for concern. When he gets on the island, they undergo such degradation and such madness by these like pirates who have been around for like 300 years that you expect to see some of it wear on him, and it doesn't. So that when he finally loses it, although you as an audience finally go, yeah, he's woken up and done something, like there is a moment where you go, oh, for fuck's sake, thank God, it's not the character arc or the moment that it should be based on what I think the writer wants him to be, and Caine just isn't fucking playing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, because it's not some spectacular script. It's really not, but it has beats in it that he completely kills with his performance. Like I say, that thing with finding the girl in the ocean, trying to run away. All these things are performed in just identical, emotionless.
It's totally irresponsible of him. It's completely irresponsible of him. If it wasn't such a fun concept, if it wasn't so batshit crazy. And if the pirates weren't all played by incredibly hammy British character actors, such as the likes as Tinker from Lovejoy, that grubby guy Don Henderson, who Gilliam always uses, who's there, and David Warner, who is literally playing both the Queen of the Fairies and the King of the Pirates in equal measure.
Yeah, and is it Michael Hordman?
No, Michael Horton's not in it. No. It's
so who's the guy in the white suit? Because I recognise the actor in the white hat, and he's really good. And he's got a really good line where he talks about, and it's not, like I say, it's nothing like super special, but with just a bit more effort from Caine. And he's got a nice line in it where he says, where he talks about, these people are...
Frank Middlemas. That's who it is. It's Frank Middlemas. Yeah.
Frank Middlemas. So he's sat in a hammock and he's talking to Caine and he's saying, like, these people are, completely elemental people. They have no bullshit about them. They are completely preserved specimens of a sort of purer kind of humanity and stuff. And the way he says it, that's a good, strong character. The pirates themselves aren't drawn quite well enough because there's too many of them. There's too much ham. And that's fine. They're hamming it up because they haven't got a huge amount to work with. But David Warner should have been a bit more of a character rather than just a guy who sort of has floppy hair and a sort of mad stare.
Well, it's also a bit difficult because they're speaking in this like sort of patois, broken English, pirate speak, turn of the century, whatever it is. Because they're speaking in this garbled thing, he can't really speechify or like Shakespeare it up to the max because it's a bit cumbersome in his mouth, No,
but also the character of I think the thing which is weakest in the script is the thing with the his relationship with this the only woman on the island, because all she does is trust him and he gets away and then she gets in trouble and then nothing is resolved with her at the end like whatsoever. It's just this thing that happens to happen to him and this character who he happens to have this weird sex slave relationship with, and that's not really drawn out at all. And do you know what I mean? Like the pirates could have had a bit more to them.
Yeah.
But for a movie about a B movie about what if pirates survived, I think there's enough there in the script, and Caine is just so can't be arsed with it because he's obviously read it and gone, this is so. But he seems to have just gone through the stage of going like, well, this is completely beneath me, but it's a paycheck. So, but have this really bad attitude of like, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to make it perfectly clear that this is beneath me, but I'm going to take the money.
And it's a real shame because if
that's not really forgivable, is it? Really? I
mean,
don't get me wrong. I love the guy. I love him, but it's not. Can you imagine being on that film and like acting with him and going like, "Oh fucking come on!"
Yeah. If he'd caned it up to the max, if he'd been completely like, bloody hell, like, I've got to, if he'd been like real Caine about it, I would have, imagine if he'd just been, if Caine had even given a fucking ounce of a shit, like just a fucking scintilla of a poop, if he'd given so much as a squeaky fart towards this movie, it could have been really enjoyable to have him because the whole point, the character is meant to be faced with these utter horrors that you can't even imagine, right? These utter horrors, and it's meant to wrestle with his decision to be a pacifist and all the rest of it. And that's clearly what it is. Otherwise, the character wouldn't spend so long in the movie not acting out against his captors, other than to try and escape, And so, with him not playing it, you lose so much of what could have been this amazingly gonzo movie. It could have been an absolutely mad gonzo movie, and it is, but it lacks a strong center, which Caine really could have provided, and which I think is there in the makeup of that character. And I think
you can see that if he'd have been a bit more, because he has one line that he obviously likes in the whole film, which is what, a bunch of arseholes playing Long John Silver. Like that's a really good line, and he sinks his teeth into that and does it well. And that's the only line he bothers with in the whole film. I mean, I don't think any other line is said with.
No, the best scene is when the doctor is basically not the doctor. Sorry, the guy in the white suit shows up and says oh, they're the master race and they're these perfect things, and they're perfectly preserved and they're vicious and blah blah blah. He's doing this big speechifying like a Bond villain, and everything he's saying, Caine is like, "What are you talking about? Bloody bunch of lunatics!" Like that's the best scene in the whole movie for Caine.
It is, yeah.
And the bit that is total B movie, which is his Rambo-esque business on the boat.
Yeah. So, I guess what you have to say about it is I would definitely say it's worth a watch. It is, in the B movie with your B movie hat on.
Oh, big B movie hat on with a big floppy pirate B movie hat on. Yeah,
then it is worth a watch, but. It is, and to be honest, I wasn't watching it like being frustrated at him, but you sort of got to the end of the film and then went, and that's when I started to think it is one of those thought processes you have after the film, and you sort of go like, well, all right then, but I just wish he'd woken up a bit earlier.
Do you know the thing that I really liked? The thing that I really liked about it was that far from being just a bunch of crazies, when the pirates attacked something. No matter what people tried to do or what people tried to throw at them, they were a strong, elite, well-organised, resourceful group of fighters. There's a really bizarre bit in it as well where a martial artist fights
weird.
Off against a pirate with a sword or something, and it's utterly bonkers. But also really enjoyable to watch, you know what I mean? Because all the pirates know they're going to win. And
I agree. I think that's the best thing about it is the way the pirates are really...
Well, they're triumphant, and you're not meant to side with them, but you end up siding with the pirates because Caine is being such an ass.
Yeah. And I guess, with a different lead there, it would have lifted it a lot. It wouldn't be completely amazing, but it is. Perhaps it would have been worth after he came up and turned up on the first day of shooting and gave his little speech about this is exactly how little I can be asked with this endeavour. That he went, do you know what? Maybe we'll go and sneak away and do a few rewrites and make the pirates a bit more of a give them a few. I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they went in and gave me. I mean, David Warner's got a great line when a few people have died in their final raid, where he yells to the rest of his people, "Grieve not, we'll see them again in hell." Just a really good pirate. That's the thing. They should have pirated them up just a little bit, ratcheted up that pirate even more, and just made them and just laid on all that stuff. Which even in a shitty film like Pirates in the Caribbean, they do at least know how to that pirate language, which is so glorious, maybe used a bit more of that. But it is there, and it has got some really interesting things in it. It's got a bonkers ending. I mean, the whole thing is bonkers.
The whole thing is bonkers. When the plane crashed and blew up, I was like, I don't know what film I'm watching anymore. I'm going to go along with the ride. That's really what I'm going to do. And I think to wrap up then, to end this thoroughly enjoyable episode, I think a couple of flawed mini masterpieces with a lot of potential that don't quite reach but are enjoyable nonetheless in their own bizarre ways, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, definitely.
No more to say about that. So I don't know what we'll do next time. Let's not worry about that until next time. But a real pleasure, sir. I've enjoyed talking Caine and Keaton. I'm glad that we agreed. There was major agreements there with the points that we both had about the movies, which I was happy about. And did you have any final words you wanted to say, sir?
No, tremendous fun as always. I mean, I don't think there's anything to disagree about Caine's performance because it just isn't there. There just isn't one.
Yeah.
but still, both worth watching. And I really, really like what I really like about doing these series where you just pick on a couple of actors is it does force you to watch some really, just stuff you never would normally watch and find strange little pleasures in them. And that's what I enjoy most about doing these.
And then we get to see the culmination of them both stuck in straight-to-video B heaven at around the early millennium, like you say, before Nolan finds him in whatever the movie is that they start together. That's the movie that we finish the whole series with eventually.
Yeah. Well, we have to do in January. We'll have to do Birdman because Birdman will be out over here.
Oh, I can't wait for you to see Birdman.
I'll watch that as soon as I get in. I'm thrilled to bits that there's a director out there who has gone, get me Michael Keaton. As soon as he has this really cool movie to do, Hollywood gives him the chance. He says, okay, I'll do it, but I want Michael Keaton. I give that a director so much fucking kudos for that. I can't wait to see it. So we'll have to probably...
It's really good. There's one performance in it where I was like, oh, that's a shame. And I want you to tell me who it is when you've seen the movie. I think everyone is amazing in it except one person who I was really surprised they weren't as good as they should have been.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, that's our next episode then.
All right, Chief. We'll do Birdman and...
we'll pick a modern-ish Caine one to do.
I'm not doing Interstellar. I'm not watching Interstellar.
No, not Interstellar, but we could maybe do that one that's set in London or whatever or something like that, or... a 2000s-ish one, as opposed to a 1980s.
I'll have a think. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll try and have a think where, not the Nolan ones, but where he's done if you mean Harry Brown, no, that's awful. But something where Caine has done something recently that's been a surprise, like Keaton doing Birdman. I'll have a think. Yeah.
Cool. All
anyway,
right,
Chief.
Well, take care. It's lovely to speak to you, as always.
Lovely to speak to you too, sir. Hey, Mr. Churchill comes over here to say we're doing splendidly. But it's very cold out here in the snow, marching to and from the enemy. Oh, I say it's tough, I have had enough, can you stop the cavalry? I have had to fight almost every night down throughout the centuries. That is when I say, oh yes, yet again, can you stop the cavalry? Mary Bradley waits at home in the nuclear fallout zone. Wish I could be dancing now in the arms of the girl I love. Wish I was at home for Christmas. Bang goes another bomb on another town while the Tsar and Jim have tea. If I get home, live to tell the tale, I'll run for all the presidencies. If I get elected, I will stop the cavalry. I wish I was at home for Christmas. I wish I could be dancing now in the arms of the girl I love. Mary Bradley waits at home, she's been waiting 2 years long. Wish I was at home for Christmas.